Welcome to Mission Undercover. Joining me
Joining me
today is
today is
Naresh
Naresh
Vissa,
Vissa,
founder and
founder and
CEO of
CEO of
Krish Media
Krish Media
Marketing.
Marketing.
He is the
He is the
best-selling
best-selling
author of
author of
Podcastonomics,
Podcastonomics,
the book
the
of
book of
podcasting to
podcasting
make
to
you
make you
millions.
millions.
He
He
also
also
previously
previously
served as a
served as a
financial
financial
analyst,
analyst,
managing an
managing an
investment
investment
portfolio
portfolio
of
of
$1.2
$1.2
billion.
billion.
We're going to
We're going to
discuss
discuss
monetary
monetary
policy,
policy,
healthcare
healthcare
policy,
policy,
the
the
political
political
landscape in
landscape in
America
America
and
and
around the
around
world,
the world,
entrepreneurship,
entrepreneurship,
racism,
racism,
and social
and social
mobility.
mobility.
I want
I
to
want to
start by
start by
talking
talking
about your
about
journey
your
as an
journey as an
entrepreneur.
entrepreneur.
What
What
challenges did you
challenges did you
face when
face when
starting your
starting
first
your first
business?
business?
Well, thanks for having me on the show. And this is a topic that I love talking about because I truly believe in capitalism. In the United States of America, we have a system, we have a constitution, we have an economy that is based on rugged, hard capitalism. And there's no better way to be a true capitalist than to become an entrepreneur or start your own business. It was not easy. And what I recommend people do is number one, it's never too late. So if you're young, get started immediately. I was in my mid 20s when I got started with my business, my first business, Krish Media and Marketing, but I always had that entrepreneurial spirit in my teenage years. So that's the first thing. It's get started early because you're going to run into many, many challenges as you get older. You think life gets easier as you get older? No, it actually gets harder as you get older because you may have a mortgage, you may be married, and you have a spouse to worry about. You may have children, a family, you may have health issues. There are all sorts of, you got to save for college. There are a lot of things that you have to worry about. So get started young. The second thing that helped me a lot to mitigate the risk is that I started my side hustle as a side hustle and it eventually became a business. So I started my company, Krish Media and Marketing, on the side. I worked full time on Wall Street. I worked for some well-known marketing companies, financial companies, and on the side, I always had this hustle of online and digital media marketing. Even though I worked in finance, I actually started out as a terrestrial AM FM radio producer, completely remote on the side. And I did that for about 7 years, 6 years before jumping in full time to start Krish Media and Marketing. So when you start a side hustle, then the hope is that eventually that side hustle will become big enough so that you don't have to be dependent on that full time job and you can take over that side hustle. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is they're working a full time job, they quit that full time job, and then they say, I'm going to start something. So they don't even have a business plan. They don't have a proven business model. They don't have any clients. They don't have any customers. They just quit and then they're starting from scratch. No, sorry. When you're young, you have the time and the energy to start this side hustle. So definitely do that, and that'll mitigate the risk and the challenges that you face.
What was
What was
one
one
key
key
decision or
decision or
factor that
factor that
contributed to your
contributed to your
success?
success?
Well, the first decision, I think I shared a few of the decisions, which is number one, have the side hustle. Number two, start young. But I'll also say that another really, really important key decision was working in corporate for a few years. So I worked in corporate America for 3 or 4 years. And it was that experience that told me, hey, I don't need this. Number one. Number two is I don't fit into this. Number three is there are different types of corporate. You have hardcore corporate America, right? The brick and mortar standard. You dress up, you go to an office, a nice office. In my case, in New York City, in Manhattan, in Brooklyn, New York, and you go in, you work. Then you have the hybrid corporate market. So I then said, this is not for me. Let me try something that's not a startup, but that has a startup vibe. So I worked at a company that had a startup vibe where I could wear this to work. I could wear this to work. I could show up whenever I wanted to. I could leave whenever I wanted to. It was very hybrid. It was very laid back. But at the end of the day, I thought initially, oh, this is great. This is freedom, autonomy. At the end of 1 year, I told myself, I said, this is actually still corporate at the end of the day. You have to deal with the same politics. You have to deal with the same nonsense of a boss and all sorts of other things. Oh, that's another reason why I didn't stay in corporate or why I couldn't handle corporate, but it's the experience that counts. Because what I learned in corporate was one, what I'm not good at, two, what I shouldn't waste my time on, three, which is the most important, they basically trained me on skills and ideas that I was not trained in. And they opened up my worldview to an entire ecosystem of, in my case, the online and digital business world, the e-commerce world. They opened me up to that. And I was like a sponge. I was like a 3 year old, 4 year old. I was just soaking everything in, trying to learn as much as I could. And I somewhat knew in the back of my mind, as soon as I got into corporate, I knew I'm not going to be here very long. So I need to just take in everything that I can. And that's what you need to be doing, especially in your 20s, whether you're in school or you're working at a company. You absolutely need to be taking everything in, soaking it all in, trying to learn as much as possible, gain skills. You want to gain skills, actual hard technical skills. And the 4 skills that I always talk about are reading, writing, speaking, and technology. Those 4 things, because the only way you can really learn a lot is by reading a lot. So I read a lot of books, a lot of newsletters. I also back then started listening to a lot of podcasts. I know that's not reading, but it's almost reading because now audiobooks are considered books and a podcast is basically an audiobook. Reading, writing, at least back then, I don't know if it's still as valuable today with artificial intelligence writing for you. But back then, writing was so important. How to write a proper email, how to write a resume. Writing is so important. Communication, so important. Reading, writing, speaking. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Somebody told me 30 years ago, actually, that the way you speak is how you gain respect. It doesn't matter what degrees you have, or if you have no degrees, or what schools you went to, or if you never went to school. The way you speak says a lot about you. And just a short 30-second soundbite, the way somebody speaks, other people, the world, that's how they're going to gain their first impression and perception of you. So reading, writing, speaking, and technology, I feel like this is now more important than ever. I've been saying this for 10 years now, that the person who's up to date on technology, who knows how to use technology, is always going to have a job. And now I mean this more than ever before, not because artificial intelligence is taking over jobs, but because artificial intelligence is now at our fingertips, to where we can be more productive and we can be even more valuable to businesses. So now I'm in my late 30s and I'm still learning a lot about tech. I thought I had it all figured out 10 years ago. And then now over the last 3 years, the digital landscape has changed so much, and it's going to be revolutionized as we move forward because of artificial intelligence. I mean, literally every pain point, every problem, every need that anybody can have, at least in the tech space, there's an AI solution for it's pretty incredible. So those are the 4 areas that I tell people. If you know reading, writing, speaking, technology, it doesn't matter what field you go into, whether it's healthcare or tax or politics or tech, it doesn't matter what field you go into, you're going to do very well. And those are the first initial skills that you need to build to start a business.
Out of
Out of
those
those
skills,
skills,
how would
how
you
would you
say
say
that someone
someone
could
could
improve
improve
their
their
AI
AI
skills
skills
today
today
or their
or their
communication
communication
skills today?
skills today?
Well, that's basically two different questions. So let's start with communication skills. So that's actually something. I'm going to give you a 2 or 3 part answer. So number one is, if you're a parent, that's something you can implement into your kids. It's something that starts since the kids are 2 years old, literally, because a parent who puts their kids in situations to where they have to communicate, that kid is going to do better. So how do you put your kid in those situations? Number one, sending them to school. And I know there are a lot of parents who say, I don't want to send my kids to school. I want to homeschool them, because the numbers show that homeschooled kids do better at school, which is true. On paper, homeschooled children have higher grades, they have higher graduation rates, they have higher college graduation rates, they have higher SAT scores. Nobody is denying that you do better on paper, but communication skills are not what's on paper. At the end of the day, does doing 20 points better on the SAT really matter much in the grand scheme of business entrepreneurship in life? Probably not. So number one is that. Number two is, how else do you put your kid in such situations? They need to socialize. The kids need to have friends. So again, this is something that starts at age 4, age 3, 4, 5 years old, where if you get invited to a birthday party, you take your kid to that birthday party. If your kid has friends and he's having fun, you let that kid have fun, invite those friends over. That's how you build communication skills, by working with other people. It starts at a really, really young age. Sports is another great way to build communication skills, especially team sports, even individual sports. When you have a coach, you need to develop a very strong relationship with that coach, and that requires strong communication. But team sports require you to work as a team, and the only way you can work as a team effectively is through strong communication. So that's one bucket. And many people listening to this are probably like, okay, my parents didn't do any of this. So now what do I do? How do I build up these? Well, you can still do the same stuff. You can still go to those parties. You can still invite people over. You can still join a sports team. You can still hire a personal trainer. Even as an adult, these principles still apply today to how you can develop those communication skills. You have to put yourself in uncomfortable situations to gain comfort. That's the only way you're going to improve. So it is very uncomfortable. I remember when I was scared of speaking in front of the public. I remember I was scared of getting in front of a podcast or a microphone 20 years ago. It is very uncomfortable, but that's how you get better. And the important thing is you have to want to get better. So in sports, one popular thing that coaches do is they look at film, they look at tape. So you play in a game, after the game, you look at the tape, you look at the film, and you as a player and the coach can go over, hey, you did this wrong, you did this wrong. You're nitpicking at everything, and that's how you're learning, okay, I'm not going to make that same mistake again. You have to do that when you're giving these public presentations. They don't even have to be public. They can be simply regular conversations, approaching people who you don't know. How do you approach people who you don't know? Go to a mall. Go to a mall, and if you're a man, go shop for some cologne. And somebody's going to come to you trying to sell you some cologne. Have a conversation. Go to a car dealership. Someone's going to come to you trying to sell you a car. Have a conversation. That's how you have conversations with strangers. Now, that's oral communication. I said writing and speaking. So I'm speaking, we've gotten taken care of, but then there's written communication. And written communication, as I alluded to earlier, isn't as important as it used to be. It's still very important. People need to know how to write. I should take that back. People need to write properly. However, because of artificial intelligence, you can now get the AI to do the writing for you. And I know that sounds bad. I wouldn't want my kids learning that yet. I want them to master the art of writing first before jumping into the AI. But for the people who, again, are not children who are in their 20s and their 30s, the best way to become a better writer is to be a good reader. So read a lot, read people who you like, read people with personality, because once you, and I know this is a little late for people who are in their 20s and 30s, but once you master the mechanics, the grammar, the usage, that's step one to being a good writer. Once you do that, then you can add personality to writing. And the best way to become a better writer, as I said, is to read other writers.
Okay. So, what would you say is your top investment advice amidst the AI revolution? So, there's a lot of different competing investments, particularly the stock market and gold. Now, one is focused specifically on crypto. Do you think it's a viable investment? Because many economists are like deriding it as a Ponzi scheme.
Well, crypto, I'm still very much a fan of cryptocurrency, particularly the top cryptocurrencies. So let's just say Bitcoin, Ethereum. There are now thousands of cryptocurrencies out there. There might be tens of thousands of cryptocurrencies out there. I'm still very much on board with cryptocurrency as a whole, simply because of adoption. When you have the president of the United States plus the presidents of major nations like El Salvador, various European nations, various Asian nations, which are pro crypto, pro Bitcoin. And then you have Wall Street and Silicon Valley. So before it was just Silicon Valley who was behind the crypto space. Now you have Wall Street behind it, and these large big banks which run the world, and these tech companies which also run the world. They now either have crypto treasuries, or they're accepting cryptocurrencies, or they have entire departments, entire divisions dedicated to the sole focus on the research and development of cryptocurrency. Crypto is here to stay. I think the whole Ponzi scheme aspect of it was more of a debate in 2014 or so, and then again in 20. So really until about 2020, we'll just say until about 2020, maybe even 2022, there was a debate. This thing's going to go to zero. Nobody knows who created it. It's a big Ponzi scheme. But the fact that everybody has gotten on board, the big players, the people who we all look up to, who we put our money with, they've all gotten on board. And so that tells me crypto is not a Ponzi scheme. Now, is it a good investment? I would not call it an investment. It's definitely a speculative investment. Crypto, for example, over the past 5 months is down 50%. Anything that can go down 50% in 5 months consistently, I mean, it does that like once every other year. It's not necessarily, I wouldn't call it an investment, it's a speculation. So I'm not all in on crypto. I own a good chunk of crypto. I have since 2014. I've bought and sold since 2014. But the best investment at the onset of this AI revolution is number one in yourself. So learning these AI tools, like I already told you about, that's number one. The best investment is always in yourself, and the second best investment is in viable AI technologies. So there are certain stocks, there are certain companies that have invested a lot of capital into artificial intelligence. Companies like Microsoft, Google, Tesla, Nvidia. These are the companies that are already so big. These are, I think I named four of the largest, four of the eight largest companies in the world, or the seven largest companies in the world. Well, these companies are going to continue to get even larger because they're at the forefront of this AI revolution. So ChatGPT, for example, which is the most popular AI tool in the world, ChatGPT, that's actually owned by Microsoft. A very large, very large shareholder of ChatGPT is Microsoft, and it's only a matter of time until Microsoft very likely takes over at least 50% of the company. So Google's working on their own AI. You can use it. You can just go to Google and use it yourself. You'll probably see it. Everybody knows that Elon Musk is at the cutting edge of artificial intelligence, and Tesla really is AI software. That's what it is. It's not even a car company. And he's working on all sorts of other companies that are implementing artificial intelligence. I think there are certain companies like that I feel safer investing, because those companies also have other segments that are generating, that are cash cows. So even if the AI failed, which I don't think it will, but even if it does, then Microsoft still has the Microsoft Office suite. It still has LinkedIn. Google still has its browsers, its Android phones. Google still has a bunch of other segments. So that's why I like these companies a lot more than something that's more speculative like Bitcoin.
I think the appeal of crypto is partially linked to how people have such a big distrust of the financial system, especially after 2008. And now we are seeing ramping AI investments are seeming to look like a speculative bubble again, and there's risks that everything could come collapsing again. So how can we reshape the banking system? How can we reshape the financial system to make it more stable, to prevent catastrophic global crashes like we've seen in the past?
Well, I think at some point I don't think we're in that AI bubble yet, because AI, you don't see so the two popular trends are, is my grandma investing in something, and are strippers investing in something. We're not there with AI yet, because most people still do not use artificial intelligence, and there's so much AI out there that people don't even know about. And once they know about it, and once they figure it out, that's when we're going to start seeing the change. And that change it's going to be coming very soon. In the case of cryptocurrency, I remember in 2013, the first time I heard of crypto and Bitcoin, Ethereum wasn't even a thing back then, at least in the mainstream. But I remember people saying this is going to change the financial system. Exactly what you just said. The global financial system can collapse, and this is going to change the financial system. And my biggest problem back then, I said, the adoption of this is too complicated. People, they just don't get it. They don't understand it. This is, and I said back then, I said it's going to take at least 20 years, if not 30 years, for this to be
It's
adopted.
also that its value is still unstable, so it can't be used as a fixed currency.
Yeah, you're right about that. But as far as adoption goes, here we are 14 years later, 13 years later, and it's still, your average Joe on the street still cannot explain it, still may not even own it. Most people actually do not own cryptocurrency. Most people above the age of 50 do not own a cryptocurrency. Maybe even above the age of 40 don't own any type of cryptocurrency. And if they do, they can't explain it. They don't know what it is, compared to owning, let's say, a share of Microsoft stock. Someone who owns Microsoft stock can tell you, oh yeah, Microsoft, yeah, they make my computer, they make Windows. They can tell you at least something about it. And so with the artificial intelligence, it's all about solving problems. And will it reach bubble territory? Yes, it will, because the internet solved a lot of problems, and the internet reached a bubble and came down crashing post Y2K in 2001. So that will eventually happen, but we're not even close to that. We're not close to that level yet. I don't think we're close to that level because, like I said, the indicators don't show it. We're not hearing grandmas and strippers talking about AI stocks. Once we start hearing that, and when I say AI stocks, I don't mean Microsoft or Nvidia. I mean these no name, no business model, low, small cap AI stocks. That's when we know, okay, we've reached a bubble. Everything at some point, anything popular at some point is going to hit a bubble. That doesn't mean it's a scam. That just means the market is correcting and adjusting to what the true value is. And we saw that with the dot-com boom of the 90s, and that fell off post Y2K. And eventually we will see it with AI because I'm convinced about AI. I'm absolutely convinced that the AI is coming for our jobs. The AI is coming to make our lives easier. Job wise, because I know people are concerned, I do believe that AI is actually going to create many new jobs. Yes, the lower, I don't want to call it lower level, but any job that requires somebody sitting behind a computer doing stuff is going to be gone. Like any job that requires somebody sitting behind a computer doing stuff is going to be gone. I hate to break it to people. Those management jobs, those middle management, managerial type, they're already being cut. The jobs, research positions, writing positions, we already talked about writing here, they're going to be cut because stuff, you brought it up earlier, I was an equities analyst on Wall Street and for 2 years, and it was just research, pitching investment ideas. And what I would do in 1 month can now be done with one good day's worth of work on AI, creating the pitch deck, finding the investment idea. I mean, the other day I was at lunch with a friend and he brought up AI. He said he's not an analyst or anything. He just said, hey, this AI thing is big. What stock should I invest in right now? So I did, use my criteria, went on to AI, used my criteria, put in some inputs, asked for some basic cash flow generations, free cash flow, and stocks that were trading at what I thought were discounts. And boom, it came up with two stocks. And it said, these are two stocks I have for you. So I asked for the one with the larger market cap if it had a good business model, and AI told me everything. In a matter of 5 minutes, I was able to find out this idea. And if I wanted to, I could then turn all that into a pitch deck on PowerPoint if I wanted to. I could just say, hey, turn this into a pitch deck on PowerPoint. I could say, turn this into a one-page PDF summary promoting this investment idea. Boom, everything could have been done in 2 hours. That's the benefit of AI. And I truly do think that the people who are on the cutting edge, the people who are curious, the people who are entrepreneurial, they will do very well in this AI economy. And look, even those lower level jobs, they're not going anywhere. Like anything that's relationship based, I actually think those jobs will be even more important. Relationships are still, AI cannot replace relationships or human to human contact. So I think a lot of these relationship type of jobs, a lot of these service type of jobs, I don't think they're going to be replaced by the robots. I think there's always going to be, people giving you money at the bank. We saw that ATMs, for example, they did not replace the bank teller completely. In fact, ATMs, there are countless studies that found that ATMs, when they went ubiquitous in the 90s, they actually created more financial and banking jobs. So yes, they did get rid of many bank tellers, but they created, more security jobs to make sure that the security was secure, more technology jobs because the ATMs were run by technology, more transportation jobs because ATMs needed to be manufactured and transported. They created more financial jobs because people going into the bank to get their money, for whatever reason, it was found that all of a sudden they were now more interested in also, opening up an investment account or opening up a CD or a savings account or whatnot. So it created all sorts of jobs, and technology throughout history, from the printing press that Gutenberg invented to the Industrial Revolution, to the ATM, to the internet. My job right now as a real estate investor, you can call me a laptop landlord, plus as a digital media and marketing small business owner, my job did not exist 30 years ago. It did not exist 25 years ago. But this role, this function was created as a result of technology. And that's what people who are anti-AI, I keep telling them, it's going to be fine if you stay on the cutting edge, if you learn and if you embrace it. And that's my philosophy in life. You can go through the same experience. You and I can go through the same experience and you can come out of it as a victim, as somebody who's, oh, I don't like it, I'm sad, I'm depressed. Or you can look at it like how I look at things, as the glass half full, or actually as the glass full. Hey, this is a tremendous opportunity. I think this is great. We should embrace it. So most of my answers to your questions today are going to be very optimistic. Let's embrace this. Let's take this on. Not, oh man, now this is going to be more work. I have to learn how to do AI. I have to learn this. I have to learn that. Like school was a waste of, no. And unfortunately, about half the world, at least half the world, has that type of mindset and attitude. And those are the people who are going to be left behind in the AI revolution.
Well, there is one area where you won't have much optimism, because I want you to tell me what your assessment is of the US economy. Because currently, from where I see it in the UK, the US has a strong innovation economy and business environment, but its growth is very unstable and it's sustained by just a few small sectors. And Trump's tariffs have decimated the economy. They haven't achieved their stated aims of bringing manufacturing back to the United States. So since Trump has inherited office, the economy has weakened significantly compared to where Biden left it, because Biden had one of the strongest economies in US history. So is it finally time for Trump to accept that he's destroyed the US economy?
Well, I think there are a lot of fallacies that you laid out, because when you say that Biden left a strong economy, we have to define how you view an economy. Because how I have always, I prefaced this entire interview by saying I am a capitalist, and the US economy is based on pure capitalism. And what that means is that the economic strength is going to be solely based on the strength of the private sector. The problem with the US economy for decades, this is not a Biden thing, this is not a Trump thing, an Obama thing. This is a capitalism. This is a supporting feature of capitalism, which is the private sector is how you create long-standing, sustainable job growth. That's the key. And what Trump has come in and done, and by politically and economically, I'm a libertarian. So a libertarian is someone who believes in true freedom, basically every man for himself, and everybody has the empowerment to succeed, no matter how you were born, what your lifestyle was, how your childhood was, who your parents were. Everybody in a system like the United States, in a capitalist system, has the chance. And there are countless examples, even on the left. Someone like Barack Obama, who grew up poor, single mother, never really met his father. And he, went on to become president of the United States. And there are countless
in societies today, the situation is much different to how it was before. Right now, we have significant levels of inequality, and the opportunity across society is not equally distributed. Someone at the bottom of society cannot access opportunity as easily as they could in previous generations, because the tax system is so fundamentally distorted amidst the neoliberal economic consensus that is choking progress and keeping us trapped within the same economic model that has trapped people in poverty for so long. So how can this consensus be sustained?
No, because what I just told you, to give you an example of Obama, to give you an example of countless people, and look, I can speak for myself, and I'm sure you're in a similar background, but my parents came to this country, the United States of America, with nothing in their pocket. When I say nothing, I mean $5 in their pocket. They came here with $5, and they were able to build a life off of that. When I was in my early 20s, I had next to nothing in my bank account, and I was able to build a life because of, I went to school, I got my degrees, I did what I needed to do to get ahead. Now, going back to that immigrant mentality, you'll find that most immigrants, legal immigrants who come to a place like the United States of America, and there are other countries, maybe the UK is similar, but they come to capitalist countries to leave their previous, to leave a country that was not very good, that was not very capitalist, that made it very difficult to get wealthy. They made it very difficult. So they come to a country like the United States because in a capitalist system, which the United States is known to be the most prolific capitalist system in the world, and really known to humankind, capitalism has raised more people out of poverty than any other system known to mankind. You can't name any other system in Europe, Asia, and South America that has lifted more people out of poverty than capitalist systems, specifically the US.
Has there any other system ever really been tried?
Communism is just one alternative that was proposed, and no other alternative has been implemented ever since.
Well, yeah, we've seen communist systems, we've seen socialist systems, we've seen hybrids between capitalism and communism. I mean,
Yes,
China.
the societies with the highest levels of development have been socialist democracies like the Scandinavian countries and like Britain after the World War, which had such high levels of development.
Well, how do you define? So you're throwing around a lot of words right now, like regarding the. So I still need to get back to like how I define an economy, and I still want to get back to how Biden left the economy. But how are you defining development, for example? Because if you're talking about tech development, if you're talking about real estate development, if you're talking about GDP, which
I'm
is
talking about economic development. By that I mean reductions in poverty and improved public services and reducing inequality. That's the three most important things.
okay. So you're
Judge whether a society is successful.
yeah. So your definition of the economy is very different from my definition of the economy because again, you're looking at the economy as the glass half full. You're looking at the economy as, like you said, you use the buzzwords inequality, you use poverty, and the capitalist argument is that yes, you are going to be there will be impoverished people in a capitalist system if they don't pick themselves up, if they don't have that rugged individualism. And the US does have safety nets for such people. The US is not simply like, I don't know where your home country is from. My home country is India, for example. And when I used to visit India as a kid, the amount of poverty I would see on the street, I would ask my parents, like, how come I don't see this in the US? Like, the homeless people in the US look so much better than these people in India. And so even the US, as a capitalist system, has had safety nets to protect people so that we don't become a country like that, or we don't see the levels of poverty that a country like India sees. Now, when I say that I define economy, I want to go back to defining the economy because you defined it by poverty and by inequality. Inequality, but I mean, really, one of the fundamental definitions of capitalism is that there is inequality. It's the idea that you can get ahead if you work hard, if you are innovative, if you are an entrepreneur. You can get it because if everybody is equal, if you want to get rid of inequality and everybody is equal, then there's no incentive to do anything. There's no incentive for me to be Steve Jobs and to start, a company that revolutionized and changed the world. And you see this when you visit an actual country like Cuba, where there is equality, where everybody is basically making the same amount of money because nobody is incentivized to do anything. Nobody's incentivized to improve the infrastructure.
The situation in Cuba is different. First of all, absolute equality is never something that should be advocated for because some level of inequality is always necessary to reflect opportunity and how different levels of effort in the economy as well. But Cuba is being hamstrung by the blockade that the US has had, an indiscriminate blockade for the last few decades, which has suppressed its growth, suppressed its trade, and trapped it within poverty. That is one factor. And also, what you mentioned about social security nets, those are even being constantly eroded by the right-wing government that is currently in place in America. Social security is being eroded once again. Social security has always been very low and very inefficient.
Well, again, I never said that that's something that I don't disagree with what you just said because I think we should reduce. So Social Security, I wouldn't use that word because Social Security program has not been touched. That's been completely fine. But the social safety net I think that's what you're talking about, the safety nets. There are many social safety net programs that absolutely should either be gone or the entire point of these programs was to get people back on their feet so that they could have that same opportunity that my parents had when they immigrated to this country. That's the whole point. The point of these programs was not to become a permanent program where it essentially becomes a job for these people to just take money from the government. And I have countless as a real estate investor, for example. I participate in some of these social programs, for example. We have something called Section 8 housing in the United States, which is essentially subsidized housing for low-income families, low-income people. And initially I thought, similar to what you said, hey, this program's great. It's a way for people to basically get free housing until I got Section 8 tenants in there. And it became an absolute nightmare because these tenants, their job became to find out all the loopholes in the law, in the system, to trash my property and then get a new voucher, blame me as the landlord, for whatever grievances they had, and then get a new voucher to move into an even bigger, better house and do the same thing, and the cycle repeats itself. So it's unfortunate because I know not all people are like that, and I think it's not right to generalize anything to say 100% of people are going to be like X, Y, or Z. But in this case, it happened way too many times to where I had to tell my property managers, no more Section 8 tenants. This is too much of an issue and a problem. And somebody, a mentor of mine, told me before I even got into real estate investing, because I had this very practical way of thinking. I wouldn't call it practical. I had this very fantastical way of thinking of, oh, everyone's nice, everyone's going to do the right thing. And he said, no, you don't understand people. You don't understand incentive structures. And he said, you're going to get it handed to you. And I said, no, you don't know what you're talking about. And this is exactly what he meant. There are many people out there who are not a part of, let's just call it the educated class, who may be a part of the lower class or the lumpen proletariat class, maybe even the proletariat class, who just think very differently. They think completely differently, and that's how they think. The way they think is, how do I screw my landlord? In my case, how do I screw my landlord and the system to get money out of the system? So again, that's a very, very, I don't think anybody raises their children to think like that. I think most parents want their kids in a sophisticated, civilized society to do things the right way, in a certain way. And answer to the answer to a lot of the problems that you brought up, I believe, this is backed up by data, this is backed up by statistics all around the world, that the key to success, if you want to give your kids the best chance, it's having that kid growing up in a household with two parents, two working parents. That is the key to success. Two working parents in a household. And I say that as somebody who, my wife, for example, grew up dirt poor, but she had two working parents in the house who put a focus on education. And part of that could be cultural. Part of that could be, in the United States, for example, I hate saying it, but education isn't as valued. It is absolutely is valued, but it's not as valued as some of these immigrant countries like in India or a Pakistan or a China or a Taiwan or a Singapore. We could keep going down the list. It's not as valued. And same thing with marriage. It's not as valued if you just look at divorce rates, for example, where in a place like India, the divorce rate is under, last I checked, it was under 2%. Whereas in the United States, the chances that you meet somebody at least the age of 70 in the United States, there's a close to 60% chance that you meet somebody over the age of 70, and 3 out of 5 of them will have been divorced at least once in their life. So that has something to do, I believe, and again, this is backed up by statistics, that kids who grow up in households with two working parents in the house are going to do way better. They have higher rates of graduation from high school, higher rates of graduation from college. They do end up making more money. They have lower incarceration rates. There's a lower chance that they're going to be addicted to drugs or alcohol. And I can keep going on and on and on the list. So that's where I say the government is not the solution. That's why I say the government is not the solution. The best government we can have is in our household. So I actually say that my household is actually, it's somewhat of a socialist, at least right now, a socialist or communist household. And maybe it's going to stay like that. I think private households being socialist or communist is a good thing. But the broader government as a whole, as I alluded to start this discussion, I'm as capitalist as it gets. And I still want to go back to the Biden thing. Yeah, I'll let you finish, and I still want to go back to
Part of
Biden.
what you said is that it shouldn't be that we have an economy where two parents need to work, where we had more fair systems before, when only one parent needed to work. Then we had higher family union as well. We had more stable families as well. So we should aim for an economy where only one parent needs to work, but we can have households where both parents can work if they want to. Isn't that the premise of capitalism, that we give people choice, we enable them to have the access to that choice, full liberty?
So I don't necessarily disagree with you. There's a reason why I brought up two working parents, because I actually grew up in a household with one working parent, like you said, and it was easier back then in the 90s in the United States to have one income, for a family to live off one income. Today it's not as possible. It's rare. It's a rare that I meet a stay-at-home dad or mom. They're there. I'm not saying that, again, I don't want to generalize, but that number has gone down significantly, and financially is the primary reason. But the reason why I say two working parents is because I know that my life could have been a lot better had my mother worked. I know that a lot of the issues that I had growing up, and this is the case with many people who I grew up with, where once you reach a certain age, you don't really need mom and dad as much. So having that financial security of, hey, we don't have to skimp on this vacation. We don't have to skimp. I don't have to skimp on this class that I want to. We don't have to budget for this trip or this class or this Christmas present or this birthday present or this car. So that's where I say that having two working parents in the house, it helps ease that financial burden. And it also gives you a perspective. So a lot of this is mental too, where when you see two parents working and you see them going to a place, or if they work from home, you at least see them making money from home. You see them basically working towards something. That makes a big impact on a kid, to see a parent working, because a lot of these kids who are on welfare, who grow up in single parent households, or in many cases, I know several kids like this who the parents don't even raise them; they're raised by grandparent, like a grandma. So it's very different when you're in that situation versus you see your direct parents who are closer to you in age, going, working, making money, going to meetings, dressing up. It impacts. So it's not just a financial impact; it's also the mental impact, and it ends up having a psychological effect on the child of something of the sorts of, I want to be like that when I grow up. This is what my dad used to do. This is what my mom used to do. So it helps on the financial side, but it also helps on the mental and the psychological side, the professional side as well. That's why I bring it up. And so even let's just say one parent is a billionaire and the other parent doesn't need to work. I would still say, hey, look, you should still do something, work for 20 hours a week. Like it's good. I'm very pro. I said I'm pro capital. I'm very pro find meaning and purpose in something that can earn you money and do that. And for some people, I know people are like 70 years old and they said, you know what, I don't want to retire. And they went and took up a job at Walmart as a greeter, like greeting people or shelving. And I say, hey, I think that's great. Like, I think that's whether you're 70 years old or you're a 30-year-old stay-at-home dad, I think doing something is going to be good for you, and it's going to be good for your kids when they see that you're doing that something. So I come from a different perspective. It's not all financial. I know you came from the economic perspective of, life was a lot better and easier when we had one parent at home and one parent working. I completely get that. But I'm coming from the holistic perspective of having two working parents in the house. So going back to the economy, I want to go back to the private sector because, again, I've talked a lot about capitalism, and you can look at the numbers, you can look at the raw numbers and say the stock market was at all-time highs and Biden did a great job, and I'm not going to deny that. If you
specific numbers I was mentioning were that there was 2% inflation, almost 2%, I think, and there was 4% unemployment. And that's the two main metrics we looked at.
Okay. A couple of things. Number one, you're right about inflation. The inflation got down to about 2.4% towards the end of Biden's presidency, so it was going down. The problem, and again, this is not a knock on Biden, the problem was that we were at sky-high interest rates. So you have to do that. When inflation is high, you have to raise the interest rates to bring the inflation back down. That's not what I'm going to pick a bone. I'm not going to pick that bone. But what you said about the unemployment rate, and that's where I bring up the private sector, because it's very easy. And again, the libertarian perspective on the economy is that the economy can only sustain itself through the private sector. When you create public sector jobs, those are not sustainable jobs. Those are jobs, we talked about AI for a while here. Those are jobs that have already been actually either eliminated or replaced by AI. And moving forward, it doesn't matter which administration it is, they are going to use technology to streamline these government processes. They're already using technology. So a lot of those jobs were public sector jobs. And from a libertarian perspective, from a capitalist perspective, most public sector jobs are jobs. I mean, nobody's raising their kids to say, hey, go work for the government. Those are jobs. The types of people who go into those jobs are just looking for a pension. Most of the people, again, I hate generalizing, but they're looking for a pension. They're looking to work somewhere, a 9 to 5. not create a whole lot of value. And that's why many of these, I know them personally. I live right next to a government
There
base.
was still decent private sector job growth as well because economic growth was the highest in the G7.
So there was decent private sector growth. I'm not going to deny that. But what we want to see is better. There's always room for improvement for better private sector. And much of that private sector growth came as a result of the world shutting down. The United States shut down for basically a year, and still about half the country was shut down even a year later for an entire year. So a lot of that growth simply came from, hey, we're opening back up, we need to rehire. So I get that. I'll let Biden take his credit there. And look, this is not about Biden because I don't like attacking anyone. You heard me throughout. Like I haven't really praised or attacked any one politician. Instead, I've praised or attacked systems or ideas and concepts. I prefer that. And also, I mean, we know that Biden really wasn't running the show for 3.5 years either. At least the last 2 years, he definitely wasn't running anything. But with that being said, the idea here, and we've never had this in my lifetime, the closest we came to, and I wasn't born, was when Ronald Reagan was president. Even when George Bush was president, we did not have this. When Trump's first term, we did not have this. Trump is not a very libertarian free market guy, but that's another discussion. But what I want to see is, in this takes something called creative destruction. This means that people will be laid off. This means that government workers or government departments are going to be cut. Private sector jobs are going to be cut because much of the private sector is dependent on public funds or some type of public support. But what I want to see is true private sector growth. And for the first time in my life, we're not seeing that growth yet. But invite me back on in 2 years, and I guarantee you the growth is going to be very different. What we're seeing now is investment into the United States. Again, we're not seeing the results of it yet, but I expect to see the growth that we've never seen in the private sector. We're already seeing it. We're going to continue to see government jobs either be destroyed, remain stagnant. The last I saw was that government jobs went down, the hiring went down, the number of jobs went down, departments have been cut. That's what I want to see, not because I hate the government, but because I truly believe in, we've seen this multiple times throughout history, that the private sector is how you determine an economy, not a gross GDP number where the government is the one spending the money to inflate that GDP or inflate or deflate that unemployment rate. I want to see true free market.
But the reason that creative destruction is being choked off is because of how much monopoly power there is within the US economy. So much economic power is concentrated in the hands of so few companies. So many consumer products are provided by the very same conglomerates. So how can we increase consumer choice and accelerate that process of creative destruction by breaking up these monopoly powers?
Well, I don't think we're at a monopoly. If you can give me some examples, you'll find in those examples that it's not even an oligopoly. Healthcare industry, I agree with. Healthcare industry, absolutely. But I would say most other industries have a free market. So healthcare includes pharmaceuticals. But in most other industries, I believe that you do have as close to a free market as we can get. We're never going to be perfect. And politics is always going to get in the way. It doesn't even matter if you have a libertarian president who gets elected. Politics is always going to get in the way. I get that. But I want to hear your examples.
Look specifically at Unilever and Coca-Cola. A lot of the drinks choices that are on offer are owned by Coca-Cola, despite being different choices outwardly. They're all owned by the same company. Unilever, in terms of consumer household products, a lot of different companies and products, but all owned by the same bigger company. There should be a wider variety of choice. It's an illusion of choice.
Well, I'll just tell you personally, I don't drink soda, and I have lots of drinks in my house, and I don't think any of them are Coke or Pepsi or Unilever products. And I'd be glad to bring them out to show you. And that just goes to show you that there is choice. I mean, some of these products are Constellation brands. Some of them are foreign, India, from China. There are lots of brands out there. And even Trump isn't stopping these brands from importing their stuff. Yes, he's implemented tariffs. And we haven't even gotten to, I believe next week the Supreme Court is going to overturn the tariffs. So we haven't even talked about that, and I don't think we need to talk about it. But overall, I think these examples that you might give, whether it's drinks or other things, there are ways to get in. There is a free market. And yes, you have these conglomerates like Coca-Cola who are there to just buy the competition. So competitor arises and they'll just buy the competition. I get that. But I think now more than ever, we have more choice. I would actually take the opposing side of that and say, hey, we actually have more choice today than we've had 20 years ago. As far as not just, I'm not, when you have marketplaces like Shein, which you would know about, you have marketplaces, Amazon and other marketplaces online. I think we have more choice than ever before, but not in the healthcare or pharmaceutical space. And I will completely agree with you on healthcare and pharmaceuticals. There's absolutely no choice. It's almost zero choice in the US. And again, that goes beyond debate or that's all politics. So I also understand that.
I want to finish by talking about the pharmaceutical industry, actually. So, what do you think is the actual truth about the COVID vaccine? Were they a remarkable human triumph, or were they a public health catastrophe? What, if anything, did Big Pharma hide from us?
It was more like somewhere in the middle. And I think there's proof that shows it. And let me explain it. Did the COVID vaccines work? The answer is yes. I think it's scientifically proven that if you took a COVID vaccine, here in the US, we had 3. You had the AstraZeneca there in Europe. Here in the US, you had 3. If you took a COVID vaccine, the chances of you dying or being hospitalized were reduced significantly. That is an indisputable fact, okay? And that's regarding pharmaceuticals in general. Let's say you have a heart problem and they give you a medication. It's indisputable that the medication that they give you is going to help your heart problem. It's going to solve your heart problem. This goes a little deeper though, because what the pharmaceutical industries don't tell you in your face, they don't tell you this in your face, is that yes, this vaccine is solving COVID, this heart medication is solving your heart problem, but it's also giving you these other problems. So it could reduce your immunity for X, Y, and Z. It could cause, neurological issues. And I say this as somebody who's not anti-medicine or anti-science. I'm probably as medicated or medicalized as anybody I know. I mean, I see a doctor almost every week. I'm not even joking. That's not because I'm sick. That's because I'm somewhat neurotic with my health. And I just want to know, hey, is there something in me that I need to know about? So I see all sorts of specialists. I'm not anti-medicine. I'm not anti-science. The problem with the vaccines was that nobody knew, including the pharmaceutical companies, because they didn't really have a chance to do. I know these mRNA vaccines were in development for decades, and that since the 1980s, they were under development, but they didn't really have a chance to see what would happen to people who, during this pandemic, what would happen to them as a result of these vaccines. And so there are numerous examples of vaccine. And this is, again, you get any surgery, they're going to make you sign a paper that says these are all the risks that come with having this surgery. The marketing behind these vaccines was such that these are the miracle drugs and you are completely safe and nothing bad is ever going to happen to you. These are amazing. They are God's gift. And Trump even ran with it. He called it the Trump vaccine. It was called Operation Warp Speed. And he stopped talking about it once, about a year after they were rolled out. He stopped talking about it for political reasons. But the point that I'm making is, did the vaccines work? Yes, they did work. They did help open up the world. The problem was the marketing behind it. The problem was, I said we had 3 different vaccines in the US. All 3 of them were very different. And nobody talked about that. The expert, even when I went to the experts and said, should I get the Moderna vaccine or the Pfizer vaccine? Where was each one manufactured? It turns out Pfizer was manufactured in China. Moderna was manufactured somewhere else. How does that affect my decision? They didn't know the answers to any of these questions. Why is the Moderna vaccine banned in Iceland and many Nordic countries, but it's not banned in the US? Again, they couldn't answer these questions. Why was the UK doing things XYZ way to deal with the pandemic, but the United States is recommending things that the UK isn't recommending, or that Switzerland, these were the questions that they didn't have answers to. And instead of answering those questions, they said the marketing was basically shut up and do as you're told. If we're telling you to wear your mask, we're telling you to wear this vaccine, and if you don't get this vaccine or to take this vaccine, and if you don't take this vaccine, you're going to lose your job and you're going to be in our system as, an anti-vaxxer or whatever. And again, I speak as somebody who got the vaccine. I got the J&J vaccine because, again, I said there are differences between these 3 vaccines. The J&J vaccine was the adenovirus vaccine, which is the same type of vaccine here in the US little babies get when they're born. They get this adenovirus vaccine. So I got that vaccine. And then after, a year and a half, I got the Pfizer mRNA bivalent vaccine, which I now regret. I probably shouldn't have gotten that, but whatever. I got it and I don't lose sleep over it. I know many people, if you can, left wingers and right wingers who lose sleep about this stuff and are saying, "Oh, you got this vaccine, you're gonna die. People are dropping dead." I'm sorry, there's no evidence of that. There's absolutely no evidence of that. People are still running with it. But I think healthy skepticism in anything, whether it's talking about socialism or communism or defunding the police or vaccines or the pharmaceutical, healthy skepticism is a good thing. And that just reminds me, here in the US, we have a socialist mayor now, Zoran Mamdani. He was the most popular Democrat in 2025, the most popular Democrat in 2025. And I wouldn't say I supported his ideas. I mean, you know where I stand politically. I don't support his ideas, but this is where I say where I'm very skeptical. I was very skeptical of his ideas, and I said I think it would be a good thing for him to win. I was rooting for him the whole time. I wanted him to win because I think it would be a good thing because these are new ideas. And you brought this up earlier that many of these ideas haven't been tried, and we don't have good examples of these ideas being tried. And I used to live in New York City. I want New York City to do very well. I want America to do very well. And if that means that these ideas win and they end up being bad ideas, that's fine. I can live with that. Maybe these ideas end up being good ideas. So even when some of these cities started defunding the police in 2020 and in 2021, I said, hey, again, I'm a libertarian, right? So I'm open to these ideas. They might sound not very good on the surface, but they haven't really been tried. Let's try it out. And if it doesn't work, and that's also how I run my business, by the way, we run ideas all the time that require a decent amount of capital. I say, hey, let's run a test. Let's run these ideas. I don't agree with it, but I could be wrong. And I've been wrong many times where I thought up front, this isn't going to work. And then I was proven wrong. And I feel like most people need to have that type of, again, I'm a glass half full type of person.
Yeah, I can agree with you on that.
Most people need to have that. And it was the same thing when Trump ran in 2015. I didn't vote in 2016, but I was intrigued by him, not necessarily by his policies, but I was just intrigued by him. So I said, let's try these ideas. And then this time around, I was all in on it because I liked his ideas a lot. I understood him more. But in 2016, he was new. And I feel like Mamdani, or just that wing of the left, I feel like that wing now, I could be wrong, but I feel like that wing, it's now their turn to share their ideas and to see if these ideas can work. And it's somewhat of a gamble because if they don't work, that can hurt the party long term. But the pendulum always swings both ways, whether it's 20 years. We're going through it in India right now.
It's just how history turns. There's always a swing between each spectrum of the politics.
Yes.
That's happening in our society.
So those are my thoughts on the COVID vaccine. I'm really more towards the middle, but I definitely do not side with the pharmaceutical companies, with the experts who were wrong about the face masks, about the social distancing, about the hand sanitizer. I mean, the hand sanitizer was complete nonsense. And here in the US, you couldn't go it was a requirement that if you were a business, you had to have hand sanitizer like in every room. And it turned out that had less than it statistically rounded down to zero getting COVID from surface to surface contact. So there were all sorts of things, and they never apologized. These people never apologized. They never just come out and said, hey, you know what, we were wrong about this, this, and this. But at the same time,
there is accountability because of how powerful these people are.
Well, you're right about that, and it also hurts their reputation because if they come out and say, then the next time something happens, or not even the next time, it's, oh, well, then why should I listen to the CDC or the WHO or the NIH? Like, why should I listen? Why should I even go to a doctor? These people are, and this ties into AI because AI has come in at a time when for the last 4 years, this is why we've seen the rise of RFK Jr., for example. RFK Jr. is a very nutty person, but he entered into the political sphere at a time when we were coming out of the pandemic, or really we were still in the pandemic, and most people, both sides, all sides, not even forget about sides, all sides reached this pandemic fatigue of, I already got my vaccine, I already got COVID, why the hell do I need to get another vaccine? Why the hell do I need to get another face mask? Why the hell do I need to do all this nonsense? And that's where RFK Jr. inserted himself and became so damn popular. Had he run as a third-party candidate, he would have been the most successful third-party candidate of this millennium.
I'm going to stop you there. We ran out of time. Sorry.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
Thanks for your time. I'd love to speak to you again. There was a few things that I didn't get to touch on, yeah?
Yeah. No problem. Okay. Good. Well, that was good.